This is a Radical Rant podcast.
Hello everybody, welcome to the Hot Tag Podcast for November the 3rd of 2019. Adam aka askcsradical here with you guys. As always, pleasure to be back talking about professional wrestling. And you're probably thinking, geez, why do you say the date? That's kind of strange. He doesn't usually do that. Well, from here on out, the podcast is going to be uploaded every Sunday. I'm going to try to keep this on the regular. The reason for that isn't even because I wanted to pick a date specifically. It's because I had a week this week where I just didn't have time to set it up on Thursday or Friday like I normally do. So I figure, okay, I finish watching Dynamite on Thursdays usually because I never catch it live. All right, fine. What I'll do is I'll record it sometime either before the weekend or on the weekend, get it up on Sunday. That way I'm not freaking out that, I'm not getting this up soon enough. So at least if it's regular, it's in a spot that you guys know it'll be up. I haven't figured out if there's going to be a specific time on Sundays. Probably just be when it goes up, it goes up. But that's the plan for the time being. If it changes, obviously you'll be the first to hear. But otherwise, Sundays is going to be hot tag time from now on. And let's just get right into all the stuff that we got here. So, generally speaking, when I want to talk about WWE, I don't want to always be negative about it, but man, oh man, this Saudi Arabia show, Crown Jewel, what is this, the third one I think they've done? And it just keeps getting worse. I'm torn whether to start with the actual major issues or just the PR stunt that they kind of pulled there. So, let's do it the shorter things. So, the big sell of this show, aside from obviously two marquee matches like Lesnar and Cain Velasquez and Braun Strowman up against Tyson Fury, which apparently it was originally going to be Brock and Tyson Fury, but that changed. The show itself, though, tried to say that it was a big deal because they would have the first ever women's wrestling match on a Saudi Arabia show. Which, yes, if you want to take it as something moving forward, I guess you can make that claim. I'm not going to sit here and tell you that that's not a massive milestone in Saudi history, but let's not forget that this is still a country that just because they let a couple of American women, well, I guess a Canadian and American woman, wrestle on their land does not mean that they're suddenly treating women better. And in fact, it's still the opposite. They still treat women poorly in Saudi Arabia. And there's no mistaking that. So I understand why WWE would want to take the PR plus and go that way and say, hey, we did a first here. And that makes sense. They are very much a PR heavy kind of company. They want the goodwill. They want all that stuff. They want the constant news coverage telling them how good they are. So it makes sense to them that that's what they want to do. But if you are not that foolish to think that there's more that just isn't solved yet, you can't hide it. The country is still not a great place for women. It still isn't, and it probably won't be for still a very lengthy amount of time. So while sure, you could consider this, I guess, progress, but in actuality, it's not really much of anything. And it's just something that, every time I see the news stories, whether it's WWE publishing it themselves or other news outlets being like, look at what this amazing thing WWE just did. It's it's not amazing. Let's be completely honest. It's not amazing. In the history books, this is not going to be looked at as something big. It's just big for about 5 minutes and then it'll be forgotten. In fact, it's probably already been forgotten by most news outlets. So I just want to talk about that. But the other big thing with Saudi Arabia was obviously, if you're listening to this podcast, you keep up with wrestling, so you've probably heard it by now. A lot of people were stranded after Crown Jewel. There were conflicting reports all over the place. A lot of people were saying it was mechanical issues. And then Meltzer comes out and says, from what I hear, it has nothing to do with a mechanical issue. Other people on the outside, I'm trying to think of who it was, but there were other people that were saying that, having mechanical issues, usually you can get on a plane within a few hours and it's not, that big a deal, but a whole 24 hours they were stranded for, something's amiss. Something seems wrong. So now a lot of people, I guess, are staying really quiet about it. Obviously, WWE is putting out a bit of a PR hit, trying to say that, nothing's gone on. It was just a mechanical issue. Nothing crazy happened. Don't worry about it. But it's very strange. Meltzer first reported that he was saying that, and this is his words, one person in the company said WWE is trying to get video from as much talent as possible to claim the mechanical issues on the plane were the problem. Just the fact they would do this is very strange, and it is. Now, a lot of things that Meltzer said hasn't been verified by other big sources. This specific one is something that Sean Ross Sapp also verified and said it wasn't even somebody to do with the company. It's just somebody on the outside saying, yeah, I've been told this too. So it's like he's heard from multiple people now that this is a thing going on. Or sorry, no, was it somebody not with, no, it was somebody that was in the company but had nothing to do with the Saudi Arabia show, just heard about it. There we go. I'm mixing my stuff up here a little bit. But a lot of information is out. It's really hard to differentiate between any of them. I lean to Dave Meltzer just because, he does come off as the most reputable wrestling journalist there is right now. And I mean, I know people are very divisive about him, but this is the information that we have seen, and whether it's true or not, there is some stuff that obviously sounds legit. And given the way the WWE has also been in the last little while, it's hard not to believe some of this stuff. But so these are all the bullet points that has been at least leaked out to people, so we at least have read some of this to see what might have happened. And again, this isn't confirmed. This isn't like 100% confirmed. This is still conjecture. This is what Dave has heard. This is what people at Figure 4 Wrestling have heard. This is not fully corroborated, but this is what they understand has happened. So WWE had not been paid for the previous show as of the end of September. WWE then said hours before Crown Jewel that they got an unspecified $60 million payment. That the entire show was a really bad situation, doesn't know what WWE is going to do going forward. He says talent told him that they were never going back to Saudi Arabia, and others saying they couldn't wait to leave the company. Now, this was definitely true in terms of people not wanting to go back. Buddy Murphy tweeted never again. I can't think of, there were a few others that were putting stuff up there. I think Ali was candid about stuff. There's one other, and I'm blanking on who it was. He had to delete his tweets. I think it was Andrade. I know he was a name that came up, and just can't remember if he was one that deleted his stuff or not. But there were a few of them that definitely went out and said, this is ridiculous. I don't understand why this is what it is. And obviously the people saying they can't wait to leave the company can also be believed because there's a lot of tension going on in the company right now, and I'll get to more of that as we finish the Saudi stuff here. So Dave reiterated several times that, again, they were not paid for the Saudi show, and they got a big payment before Crown Jewel. He said that Crown Jewel was also supposed to air live in Saudi Arabia, but it ended up being on a 40-minute delay. It sounds to him that Vince pulled the plug until he and the Saudi, whether it's the government, the Crown Prince, whoever it is, they came to an agreement, which they did during the show. None of the talent was harmed during the event nor during the wait to get on a plane out of the country, but several talent did say that they felt like they were hostages, even though they were allowed to leave eventually. And that over and over, Dave was saying that, this is a really bad situation. It was really tense. The talent really should be unionizing, but as we saw with SmackDown on Friday, they had NXT fill in a lot of the slots, and it was a really hot show. Like, I've seen highlights of the show. It looked like it was fantastic. I still don't watch the stuff live or in full. I saw a bunch of highlights from YouTube. It sounded like it was a great show. I actually do want to catch the Adam Cole-Daniel Bryan match to see how that went. But otherwise, it sounds like that SmackDown ended up being really good for the fans and for people that were watching on television. So, as Dave was saying, it's like the talent needs to unionize, but then SmackDown happens with a bunch of NXT guys. Like, WWE can just be like, oh, if you're not interested, well, we just call up a bunch of kids, have a crazy show, and we can solve that problem. Because WWE has so much money, they can just be like, all right, fine, fuck off. We'll just replace you with somebody else. At least now with AEW out there, there's an option, but I mean, there's only so much room. So some of these guys got to be thinking too. He's like, well, if I leave, like, how do I know I'm going to get the same paycheck now? Because it doesn't necessarily mean I'm going to get a job in another major company. Brian Alvarez tried to say that Vince left before he knew all the problems talents would face. Dave said we don't actually know that for sure. He liked to believe that Vince had no idea what was going to happen to the talent as he left, because Vince was one of the first people out of Saudi Arabia. But Dave also said that there's so many people really pissed off with how things went that, there was the sense that a lot of people feel like they were pawns in a dick-waving contest, which, again, you don't want to assume anything, but remember, this is Vince McMahon here, a very old guy with a tremendous ego still to this day. I can totally see Vince just being like in a standoff with a country's government and not giving a fuck about his talent at that point because he just wants his money. But who knows? It's just one of those things that, like, you just can't be sure. But the part that really makes things interesting is that a couple days ago, we also had a message from indie talent David Starr, who said, and this is verbatim, I've literally spoken to NXT talent that has been bumped to TV recently, and they had a roster meeting with management where they were told their TV pay raises weren't coming. Now, apparently further on, Hunter ended up having a big meeting with everybody to kind of get like a sense of where everything was. But this is a thing that we have been seeing with WWE for quite some time now, is that, they offered checks to those on Raw and SmackDown who they didn't want to leave, but NXT for the most part has not been touched. And a lot of these guys are all of a sudden going from just developmental contracts to being on the network, and now they're on TV on USA with NXT, and they're not seeing any difference in their pay. And if that's the case, that's really fucking ridiculous, because they should be getting more now because they're on a bigger stage. There's more money coming into the product, so there should be more an increase in pay. There should be getting a raise, especially the guys like an Adam Cole and, well, I guess all the Undisputed Era, Kushida, Finn Balor now being on there, although I'm sure his contract that he still has probably is fine. But all that kind of stuff, like that's a situation that shouldn't be happening. It should just be, oh, we're getting more money into the show now because we're getting moved up to TV. Well, you guys should get a bump in that too. That's pretty simple. But again, we know WWE for what they are. They can be very scummy at times. So I can believe that. And hopefully, as we get further into the year, as we're getting to the end, and we learn more about what happened with Saudi Arabia, you never know. Maybe some of these guys quit WWE and you get that crazy Jon Moxley-like podcast where they spill the beans on everything that was going on, and you never know what happens. But for the time being, there seems to be a lot of frustration within the company already, and then the Crown Jewel show happens, and it just made things a whole lot worse. So anyways, let's talk about the two AEW shows. So I did say that I was dropping NWA Power last week. I did not take anything on yet. I haven't decided if I want to try out MLW Fusion or anything else. At this point in time, I'm just sticking with AEW because that's where my full wrestling focus is, because I'm still so into what's going on here. So for the time being, and it may be for the foreseeable future, it depends on how I feel, because it's more a time issue, because I like now having an extra hour to play with, because I don't have nearly as much free time as I think people might believe that I do. So every second counts for me. So to take an hour out to just either chill or fit in something else, that's a plus for me. So anyway, so AEW Dark. This was an okay show. This is probably one of the less interesting ones, even though the main event was really good, but the two matches before were not that great. The first match, we had the tag team of Dustin Rhodes and Sonny Kiss taking on QT Marshall, which we saw on the Undesirable to Undeniable thing last week, and he was teaming up with Peter Avalon. Avalon comes out again and starts taking shots at sports teams. I think it's now become a gimmick, like how it's cheap heat, just taking shots at sports teams. I think they're doing this on purpose now, because even Leva Bates now every single time is shushing him because it's just getting ridiculous. So you almost feel like the Librarians now are just a pure shot at really crappy WWE gimmicks and how like simplified and just how devoid of personality they are. And it's, if that's the case, because we saw it a long time ago on Being the Elite with Avalon sitting in with the two, what was it, hands that were like supposed to be like the corporate guys of the show. And they were saying that, oh, it's such good shit, making fun of what Vince was saying to Moxley all the time. It really does seem like that's the direction they're going. And as annoying as it is, it's working. It's kind of sad that it's actually working really well. But the team of Rhodes and Sunny Kiss were actually like quite interesting. I mean, they had matching outfits, which was fun. It seems like the two gimmicks can work well together too. And actually, by the end of the match, I'm like, man, I wouldn't have a problem with seeing this more. Like, that's actually not a bad idea. But obviously, with Dustin being very close with his brother and the rest of the elite and such, he probably won't be doing something like that. But it was a fun tag team. Something I'd like to see them do again, but it probably won't be anything consistent. Otherwise, QT Marshall was fine. He's not going to blow you away. He's looks like if you need a solid heel for a match, like he's a good guy to do that. And we saw that also on Dynamite as well, which we'll get to later. But yeah, he was fine. I didn't mind him at all. The match ends with Leva Bates trying to interfere. Rhodes grabbed Bates and threw up on the turnbuckle. Took the book, kind of threw it outside. Avalon went to rush him. He dodged it, and Avalon knocks Bates off the corner, and then Rhodes would hit the final reckoning on Avalon to get the victory. It was okay. It was an okay match at best. Nothing too crazy. We get to another... I thought it was a tag match with the way that the graphic came up, but it ended up being a four-way. So you had Emi Sakura up against Allie, Sadie Gibbs, and Penelope Ford. Allie got pyro in her entrance, which was weird. I don't understand why. Like, it's not like they were in Canada. I don't think she deserves that kind of level of attention. I still think that this is a girl that needs to leave. I don't think she's ready. Same with Penelope Ford. Both of them need some work. Gibbs, this is the first time I kind of saw her actually have a little bit of time in the match. She also is pretty rough, but I think she can work at the very least because she can just be a power heel that doesn't sell as much. So I think you can make that work. But Allie and Ford, they're way too green to be on this kind of stage. And if they're going to use them, like, they need to just be on Dark and that's it. I don't want to see them on Dynamite because it just doesn't work. But, yeah, the pyro selection just didn't make any sense to me. It was just one of those things where I'm like, why are you getting pyro? You're not that special. Like, and I'm not trying to do this to be like taking shots at Allie. It's just I don't think she's at that level where you can. Because the way that AEW has been working so far is if you're getting pyro, the company's looking highly of you, and I don't see what they see in Allie. I just do not. I think she's good. Like, I'm not going to sit here and tell you she's a terrible wrestler, but she's not good enough for this kind of level of show. And a lot of girls they've had on the show just aren't working out. They're not performing the way that they need to, especially up against all these really high octane matches that the men are performing. And it's not a men are better at wrestling than women argument I'm not even trying to make here. It's just, look, you put the matches that the guys are putting on right now, and then you bring in the women, and it really is like a piss break match. I don't want to say it like that, but that's what it is. They're not nearly as good. They're not as interesting. It's just not. I'm not engaging in most of these matches. I'm trying to think of how many women's matches I've really engaged in, and it's very few. So, but there is. I mean, the crowd kind of agree with me. They couldn't really give much of a fuck in this match. Like, there was a lot of quiet time in this entire thing. Sakura was trying her best to at least make it fun. At one point, she grabbed the referee Rick Knox's arm during a 5 count and started dancing with him, doing like the hoedown, like go around in a circle kind of thing. Ford tried to run at her, so Emmy just stopped and held out Knox's arm, so he inadvertently clotheslined her. That was kind of funny. She also ended up doing a dual submission on Allie and Sadie Gibbs, and then Ford came in and abdominal stretched her while she was still holding the submission, so that was kind of cool. And Sakura also, she had all 3 girls in the corner, did a body press into the turnbuckle, and then a triple Vader bomb as well. That was pretty good. The crowd started getting into her a little bit when she started doing her Freddie Mercury stomping and clapping the "We Will Rock You" stuff. So that at least got the fans moving a little bit by the end of the match. But again, it wasn't all that great. By the end of it too, there were several times where there were really rough cuts. Like, you saw a shot and then the camera switched and it seemed like 5 seconds had gone forward. I don't know if they were trying to save time a little bit or if they were trying to hide something that happened. I'm not sure. It just seemed very strange because the camera would cut and it looked like everybody had moved up like 20 feet in an instant. So that looked very strange. And it was the only match that happened for. So it makes me wonder if they cut part of the match or if there was something that happened that they had to hide. or they had to hide, I should say. English is difficult, guys. I'm sorry. But it was strange. I didn't understand what was going on. I have tried to find other people talking about it, and no one seemed to say anything. And I know I'm not crazy because I know what I saw. I saw the positioning of one camera and then the positioning of the second one, and it didn't have any consistency. The talent were in completely different places. So I don't know what happened there. If they were just saving a few seconds, I'm not sure. But in the end, Emi Sakura actually picks up her first win with a Tiger driver, which was surprising. I was sure that Sadie was going to win just because they figured they wanted the power game, or maybe even Ali just because they gave her Pyro, so you wanted something, I guess you wanted your girl to go over, but apparently that didn't happen either. So we had 2 interviews before the main event. We had an undesirable to undeniable with MJF, which was really weird and kind of funny at the same time. But it took a bit of a turn, I should say. Out of nowhere, he's asking, how MJF felt he was undesirable, and he plays the game of, well, I've never been, but, I was Jewish, and I used to play high school football, and I was bullied, they called me Jew boy and stuff like that, and I was not expecting anti-Semitism on the show, but you also have to keep in mind that nothing that MJF says can be corroborated. You can't believe a damn word of it. I mean, there's even that documentary of him where it really seemed like he was just lying the entire time, like he was in a house that probably wasn't his. He was talking stories about football, about how he was a star quarterback and they never gave him the time of day, and they go and talk to his coach, and the coach is like, the guy was a fucking moron, he didn't know what he was doing. So the whole gimmick with MJF is you can't believe a goddamn word of what comes out of his mouth. And that Cody's just falling for it because he's blinded by the fact that this is his best friend. He even said, this is the best one we've ever done, best one we'll ever do. And you listen to it and you're like, no, it fucking wasn't. Not even close. But that's the joke, right? So that was kind of interesting. And again, it makes you wonder coming into Full Gear if MJF is going to turn or if they're going to keep making us wait. And I figure they will. They have to keep making us wait. Although having the match with Jericho for the title seems like a really opportune spot. That's why I feel like nothing's going to happen. But we're all in this weird purgatory where we're so unsure whether it's going to happen or not, that I think that's the beauty of it, because when it does happen, it'll get the reaction. If it doesn't, it'll get the reaction. So they've done a fantastic job with that. Otherwise, the other interview was a quick one with Kip Sabian, saying that they were going to take on the Elite, and that being him with Jack Evans and Angelico, the Hybrid 2, saying that, he has the best record of anybody that hasn't appeared on Dynamite yet, and that him as well as the Hybrid 2 agree that it's always been about the Elite, so they want their turn to show that they are better than the Elite and worthy of the time more than they are. And we would see that next week on Dynamite, which ended up being obviously the day after dark because that's the way it works. So our main event was Jack Evans up against Jimmy Havoc and Darby Allin. And right away, when Darby's music hits, the place explodes. You know that the longer this guy is around, if he can somehow stay out of the hospital, stay healthy, and not be out for multiple months at a time, this guy is AEW shining star. This guy is the next Jeff Hardy of professional wrestling, where everybody is going nuts for the guy, and you just hope the guy can stay healthy because of all the acrobatics and all the high-risk maneuvers he does. And people responded pretty well to Jimmy Havoc as well. Jack Evans obviously getting the boos because he's such a shit-eating heel. Does a fantastic job at that. The match itself was really good. I enjoyed a lot of it. There was a lot of crazy stuff going on. Evans, at one point, they were fighting in the crowd. They eventually went to the stage. There was a bunch of spots there. Eventually, Jack Evans dived off the stage to do something there. There were a lot of other moves later on, like some crazy stuff here that I have noted. There was a Tiger Driver 98 pile driver by Havoc onto Darby Allin, onto a chair, which that looked really cool. The fans went nuts for that one. At one point, Evans sidewalk slammed Jimmy Havoc onto 2 chairs that were stood up on their feet. So he sidewalk slams Havoc onto the top edges of the chair. Havoc's still lying there, and Evans goes up and does a 450 splash while he's still lying on it. Somehow Havoc kicks out, which was crazy. At one point, pile driver from Havoc to Jack Evans from the top of the turnbuckle through a table that was hanging in between the ropes. That looked like the end, but Darby came out of nowhere with a coffin drop while holding the chair, so it's not like the barrel from that one triple threat with him, Havoc, and Janela. This time it actually hit. He knocked Havoc away from Evans, and Darby managed to get the pin. So Darby again with another win, looking like absolute fire. This guy is way over, continues to win. This is a guy that, up there with guys like MJF and Sammy Guevara and Adam Page. Like, these are the guys that you hope that 3 to 5 years from now, if the company's still running at the pace they're running, and if they're not even bigger, these are the guys that are going to be running the place for the next 10 years. That's what you hope for. So we get to AEW Dynamite. Actually, I should say at the end, like I said, AEW Dark was it was an okay show. Like, this was probably one of the weaker ones they've had, but again, like, I don't hate the show. I want to make sure that I say that even when I say that it was all right, like, I'm still going to take it much more. I'm going to highly praise it a lot more than I ever would with the WWE Raw or SmackDown, because every time I try to watch bits and pieces of it, because I haven't watched a full show in years, but every time I watch something, there's always something that just insults my intelligence. So the only thing that AEW is doing so far is they're putting on matches that, are not that great, but they're still passable. I mean, passable for AEW is a good match for WWE at this point. So, I'll take it as it is. So Dark, while I say was okay, is not saying that it's a bad show and that you shouldn't watch it. It's just saying, hey, like, you're not going to be as blown away as you were by, say, the one that had Kenny and Janela in that no-sanction match, or unsanctioned match, I should say. So then, speaking of unsanctioned, we get to AEW Dynamite. So we started off the show, and it continued on all the way to the contract signing. Tony Schiavone riding with Cody in a limo as Cody came off a jet. They were basically just telling a lot of stories, about Cody's dad and stuff like that, and talking about, the future of wrestling with Cody and things like that. We'll get to more of that as we get to the contract signing, but the real kicker of the start of the show was after last week's main event, where it ended up in a draw and Moxley was going nuts and hitting the referee. He goes to the back and you see one of the production people say, Tony wants to see you. And this is the first time we've seen Tony at all. Well, we didn't see him on camera, but we heard his voice. And it's the first time we've heard Tony at all on this show. And he's talking with Moxley, saying that after, last week, that his match with Omega has to be unsanctioned. And Moxley is furious, talks about how, just like everybody else, Tony's putting him in a box. He wants him to be their little side show, stuff like that. And that he doesn't want this to be on the record because he's worried that, they don't want to have Moxley getting a win over their golden boy and Kenny Omega, because Kenny's supposed to be the best wrestler in the world and he's part of the elite. He's their guy. He doesn't want that to be tarnished by Moxley coming in and destroying him, and that what happens to Kenny will be on Tony's and AEW's hands. And that was a great start to the show. So our first match going in, Hangman Page up against Sammy Guevara. Guevara came out with those sequin trunks, the ones that you can put your hand over and brush in one direction and change his color. That's what Sammy was wearing on both his trunks and his knee pads. What a fucking douchebag. And I fucking love that shit. That was fantastic. The second I realized it, I was like, holy shit, what an asshole. What a attention-grabbing piece of shit. Loved that. That is the kind of shit that gets you over as a heel. Was very pleasantly surprised by that. Speaking of things that I didn't notice right away, though, it took me way too long to notice the ring post and the turnbuckles being a Rick and Morty theme. I wasn't paying attention to it. So it took me about 5 minutes into that first match to notice. Otherwise, notes that I had in here, there was a beautiful pop-up powerbomb that Page did to Guevara that Kevin Owens would have been jealous of, because the height that was given by both Guevara and Page, I guess, because Guevara had a pretty good jump to it, and then the Page just grabbed him perfectly. Everything looks so smooth. That was a fantastic pop-up powerbomb. But, I mean, Owens uses the stunner now, so it's not too big a deal. But at the end of the match, Hangman Page does the buckshot lariat. Guevara had avoided it already once before. Hangman Page lands this one and actually gets the pin. So I like the fact that it's not just the classic thing where it has to be the finisher that gets the win. We've seen so many matches won by what seems to be not nearly as devastating moves or roll-ups or things like that. And in this case, a signature move can win a match as well, which is what you need, because the thing that used to drive people nuts all the time is, like, given a great example of Sami Zayn. His Blue Thunder Bomb looks probably a lot more devastating than the Haluva Kick does. And Sammy would never win a match with that move, the Blue Thunder Bomb, even though it looks amazing. It's a fantastic move. But so many times he would never win a match with it, and it would drive people nuts. It's like, what's the point of doing the move then? Especially one that looks that good. And in this case, AEW is like, all right, well, we'll turn this around and matches that are nearly as big. Like, he's not going to win a title with a buckshot lariat. He's going to win it with the Deadeye. But it's to say that, hey, on any given night, if he just hits that buckshot lariat perfectly, that can win him a match. He just knocks the guy out. That makes perfect sense. I'm having like empty stomach burps. I'm going to need to eat something after the end of this podcast. But yeah, it's fantastic that you can take a match and it doesn't necessarily have to be setup, finisher, and that's the match. It doesn't have to be like that. And that's the thing too, is you actually can, you're not 100% sure when a match is going to end. You figure on main events, like the big marquee matches, it's going to end with a finisher. It has to. But in terms of, or I guess like, if something happens like interference or things of that nature. But generally speaking, in a marquee match, you're expecting a finisher. Any other match, you're not sure how it's going to end. That's fantastic. I love that stuff. So post-match, Paige takes the mic, does a quick promo. He says that, hey, for the last little while, I've had a real bad stretch. Obviously since losing to Jericho, he's been struggling a little bit, but for the first time in a while, he feels real good. And then he's going to do some cowboy shit and take Pac's head off. Now, in being the Elite, we've also seen a lot of little promos or like skits with Paige that I'm getting the sense that maybe the first guy to turn heel out of the Elite might be Paige, because it seems like he's getting frustrated, even more so than Kenny. And I mean, with his kind of music and his set, like, I guess it could make a little bit of sense to have him as a heel too. I would rather it be Kenny than him. But it seems like they're doing a very good job of leaving the door open, that you're always guessing stuff, because you don't know what's, like, I keep thinking that Cody's going to turn because Brandy's obviously playing the heel with what she's doing, which we'll get to in this weird thing later. Obviously with MJF technically being a babyface right now, that's a thing. You have Kenny looking like he could turn into the cleaner at any moment, and we'll get to that again later. Paige looks like he could. You could even make a case for Dustin that, he's the guy that everybody's not looking at, even just because he's an older guy. Even the Bucks could make a case for, like, even Matt could just go crazy because he's like, I'm sick of this merch shit, which is funny. But stuff like that is so entertaining to me. And for another promo with Paige to just kind of take you a little bit off the edge again, thinking like, okay, maybe he's not going to go crazy. Everything seems to be going fine again. But you never know. His match with Pac may change that. So that was very interesting. So after that, we had a women's match on the card. We had Hikaru Shida coming full-time now. So Shida did all her commitments to Japan. She has now moved to the States. So she is now a full-time AEW wrestler, which is fantastic. She is who I thought should have been the champion going in. If it had been her taking out Riho in that, All Out, I believe. So it's nice to see her back. I hope that at some point she ends up getting a good run at it. I figure somebody else is going to take the title off of Riho first, and then Shida will probably be the next one in. It could even be Brandy with the way that they're playing with Awesome Kong now, or even it might even be Awesome Kong. Who knows? But it's very nice to see her now here full time, and she actually has really good English, like to the point that it's funny because you listen to her speak in English, it sounds like she has a British accent, and it's just the way that her own accent has kind of just come out with the English words. But yeah, it's strange. Like, I've listened to her talk, and her English is actually very solid for someone who isn't having that as their initial language. So she's somebody that could definitely work relatively well as, your star female on the promotion, and I feel like she is deserving of that spot if she can keep up doing what she's doing. Her opponent was another newcomer, also from Stardom, this being Shauna. She is being called Portugal's perfect athlete, comes from wrestling in France at the time being. My girlfriend already loves her because she came out to this heavy metal harpsichord music, and my girlfriend is absolutely in adoration of the harpsichord, so that already got a plus from her. Shanna looked okay. Like, she looked a lot better than some of the other girls have. I would put her above like a Penelope Ford and an Alley. But the thing is I can't corroborate that fully because we didn't see a lot of offense from Shanna. She did have a little bit of stuff in there, but it wasn't nearly as much as, say, like Jamie Hayter did in her match with Britt Baker. There was a lot more with Hayter in terms of offense. A lot of this match was Shida just destroying Shanna for a bit, so you almost thought it was a squash match going in, but some other stuff would come in later. So a few spots that I pointed out on my notes here. Shida at one point grabbed a chair, which was confusing people. I figured, I'm like, well, she's just going to set it down and use it as a stool or something, and that's exactly what she did. Set it up on the outside, did a massive running knee That was pretty cool. At one point, Shanna had Sheeta hanging in the ropes in that, not a tree of woe, but like the spot where they're up in the corner and you knock them down, but they still have their legs hanging on the top turnbuckle and they're hanging on the top ropes with their hands because you're setting up for a stomp. Sure enough, that's what Shanna did. That got a very close near fall to the point the fans actually booed because it looked like a 3 count. At one point, actually, you know what? That's a plus for Shanna too, that the fans were upset because they're thinking, okay, that was 3. She actually got a "that was 3" chant. That's when you know that people at least connected with something there because they believed that she could have won, especially for someone you've never seen before. And generally speaking, I would assume that almost nobody in that arena knew who she was either. So, if you can make that connection early enough that the fans are willing to cheer "that was 3" for you, that's a good sign. Sheeta also did the deed with a Falcon Arrow and another kick out. This is getting ridiculous. All these Falcon Arrows being kicked out, like, I can't believe this stuff. To the point that, like, Excalibur said she did the deed, or she's done the deed, but, like, he tried really hard not to say no one kicks out of the Falcon Arrow because it's like, shit, it's happened like 3 times now in the last 2 weeks or something. He even giggled a little bit because he's sitting there thinking, man, I miss it. Like, that he loves what he's doing, but he's like, man, I miss the PWG days of just all the stupid shit we do. But by the end of the match, the crowd was way in. Like I said, once that initial "that was 3" chant came in, the fans were definitely behind everything. And eventually, Hikaru Shida did overcome Shanna as Shanna started getting some more offense in. She does a running knee strike again. This time, that gets the 3 count. I don't know if that's her finisher yet. I'm not even sure if she's done one at this point because I haven't seen a whole lot of Shida. I just knew of her for a while. And then when I saw her at Double or Nothing, I'm like, oh, I like this girl. But yeah, in the same manner of Jamie Hayter, I'd be very okay with Shanna coming back. And as it turns out, she has been signed. So she did a lot better than a lot of the other girls we've seen. And with her and Jamie Hayter, I hope that they're going to bring in more girls like this because it seems like they have a working relationship with Stardom, which opens up things, like I said previously, that maybe they do something with New Japan. Now, I saw today that Nick Jackson put out a tweet saying it's not happening. I just want to tell you guys, like, this is not a thing that we're looking into at all right now. It's not going to go anywhere. Which makes me think, well, that just always leaves the opening. I mean, generally speaking, if you say it's not going to happen, you're trying to suppress the talk about it so that if maybe you announce something and it happens. There's still a part of me that wonders if Kenny actually wins the title all of a sudden, you see Ibushi come out, or you have Okada's music play as he comes out and says, hey, I want a shot at that. You never know. I mean, look, just to talk about it a little bit more, the idea of New Japan and AEW working together. If either of those two want a fighting chance at really taking it to WWE, this is going to be how you do it. Because if these two promotions can work together, these are legitimately the 2 biggest promotions in the eyes of wrestling fans that is not WWE. I know some people will say, well, what about AAA or CMLL or even Impact? Like, I get it, but right now, in the eyes of the fans who are not watching WWE, you are either AEW or New Japan. Those are the 2 that you're thinking of right now when it comes to who puts on the best matches, who's putting on the best product. And if those 2 can find a way to work together, you will have a great chance of success because you will have the best talent left on the roster that's not on WWE, left on the planet. Generally speaking, the best guys left are in those 2 promotions right now. There's obviously a few diamonds in the rough that we haven't seen yet, some that we may not have heard of that are in like places like Australia or China or Mexico. Like, you never know. But generally speaking, from what we see, those 2 promotions have the rest of the best talent out there. And can you imagine AEW having guys like Okada, maybe not in full time, but you have guys like them, him and Naito, and maybe even Tanahashi in his final few years, because it looks like he's starting to wind down. Even getting guys like, well, I guess you're not going to get a Liger or any of those guys now because he's pretty much retired. You might even see him for like a special attraction match maybe. But then you get all the juniors like Will Ospreay and AEW. Like, you want to talk about how guys like Darby Allin are getting over. Will Ospreay will get over really good in AEW. Not to mention guys like Hiromu Takahashi, Taiji Ishimori. Like, you got so many guys. Even like, what's his name? The new guy that came in for the Bullet Club. Not Kenta, but I mean, Kenta would also work. El Phantasmo. Like, guys like those could really do a number in AEW, really get things over, especially if they bring a mid-card title or something like a junior heavyweight sort of title, or even just like a straight like their version of the Intercontinental Championship, because I think at some point they will do that, because you'll want to have at least one more title for the smaller guys to go after, like the guys who are not quite chasing the AEW World Heavyweight Championship, kind of like what the NWA has, with the World Heavyweight Championship being the top one, and then is it the North American Championship? Whatever the one that James Storm has. And that's being like, hey, this is like you're next in line if you're holding this belt. That's the kind of thing that I think could really work. And if it never happens, like, oh well, it's, pie in the sky thing. But man, if I'm a businessman, like if I can figure out a way to make it beneficial for both sides, I'm doing it, because that is a fantastic way to get a lot of exposure, especially for New Japan, because they've already done really well. But I imagine AEW is starting to pull away from them a bit. Like that some of the fans are starting to maybe leave New Japan because maybe you can only focus on one show. Like I want to keep up with New Japan, but if anything, I might keep up with pay-per-views, but it's not as easy. Like when Wrestle Kingdom comes, I'm watching that. That there's no doubt. Dominion, same story, because those are the two really big ones. But in terms of other stuff, you'll never catch me watching the G1. I can't keep up with that shit. So unless I suddenly make enough money that I don't have to work, yeah, maybe I can pull off the G1 then. But otherwise it's not as easy. But anyways, let's move on. So like I said earlier, Brandy had this really weird promo thing. So it almost looked like she was Papa Shangoing shit up here. Like she was almost sacrificing, because they showed like her beating up Jamie Hayter, and then it switched to this promo of her like in this dreary, like dark, like sacrifice looking room, like she was trying to draw a pentagram sort of deal, with Awesome Kong in there. So it didn't say anything. It didn't make really any sense. It was just a strange little thing going on. After that, you had Chris Van Vliet on TV for the first time, at least I think. And he came out with the Rock and Roll Express to show off the tag titles. And, they do a little bit of talking, but Pride and Powerful, Santana Ortiz, they suddenly attack both of them. Not Van Vliet, I should say. And at one point, they knock Ricky Morton over, and he starts crawling towards the edge of the stage. And I see a green tape line, and I go, oh shit, here we go. And they throw Morton, I think it was a powerbomb, through the stage. Almost like not like a Mae Young bump, like where they did the sit-down powerbomb off the stage, but like a powerbomb off the stage, essentially. Kind of like what, who was it? Was it Strowman that did it? Whoever did that it was Owens when he did it to Machine Gun Kelly. That's what it was. Kind of like that. But that was interesting. The Bucks eventually came out and just chased them off, but it was too late. The damage had already been done. After that, we got a little bit more of Cody Schiavone stuff in the limo, just some more stories and stuff like that, but we weren't quite at this contract signing yet. After that, we had a six-man tag match, being Rick and Rick and Morty being the best friends. So finally, we're getting Orange Cassidy in a match. So we had Trent, Chuck Taylor, and Orange Cassidy going up against QT Marshall and the returning jobber tag team of John Silver and Alex Reynolds. I actually like these two guys. You know what? I really look at them, and I was saying to my friends who keep up with a lot of wrestling, that these are two guys that I would love to have them stick around and be that tag team that you see losing every time they face somebody, kind of like what the Hardys used to do way before they got their big break. Like, I would love to see that kind of stuff. I think that's really cool. And the two guys, they're not that bad. Like, they're actually relatively solid for, a team that's just there to get their asses kicked. And same with deal, QT Marshall playing his job as just being a good heel. But it was exactly what it was. Like, Trent came out as Morty. He lost his wig a couple of times during the match, to the point that when he eventually does get the pin after the Strong Zero on John Silver, I think it was, Trent was like, during the pin, he grabs his wig, puts it back on. Orange Cassidy did a tiny bit, like he did his usual kick stint with QT Marshall. Nothing really came of it. At one point, his glasses get knocked off. Bryce helps him put the glasses back on after Cassidy does the kip up with his hands still in his pockets. So the fans at least got a little bit more of a moment with Orange Cassidy, but it wasn't too much more. Like, he still only did like a couple of things. They're keeping the guy hidden, because when he finally does have a singles match, that's when you're going to see that the guy has a little bit more to him, and who knows who that's against. It could be a comedy thing, or it could be something more serious. It could even be QT Marshall, who knows. But like I said, best friends get the win. So we finally get to the contract signing. So my first thought is, well, there's no way it's going to end in a brawl because that'd be too easy. Like they don't want to do the first brawl doing the same thing that WWE always does. Jericho comes out first, which probably irks him really, really hard because he's the champion. He should be coming out second. He's wearing this ridiculous pumpkin dress shirt. What a fucking douchebag. Same with Sammy Guevara. Just fantastic stuff. When Cody Gums comes out of the limo, that video finishes playing, and he comes out almost immediately. I'm like, man, that was a really short walk to the stage. Just a funny little note. They do a bunch of talking. They do say that the match is a 60-minute time limit, but if the match ends, it is not a draw. There will be judges. This match is not going to go 60 minutes. Let's be honest here. There's no way that Jericho, and believe me, I would love to see Cody and Jericho go 60. I don't think they can pull that off. I just don't think it'll work, especially when it's not a no disqualification match. That's when you can definitely do a little bit, like you can just brawl in the crowd for a while and take your time. 60 minutes in the ring, this isn't Kenny Omega, Kazuchika Okada. It's not going to be 60 minutes. They're just saying, from now on, main events for the title, 60 minutes, judges if they need them. They might even just pull celebrities out just to, do a little bit of extra prestige to the match, but there wasn't going to be anything too big about it. At one point, the fans are chanting, "You suck" at Jericho. He immediately turns around and be like, "No, you're wrong. It's Schiavone who sucks," as he was trying to, take a shot at Shivani. I just love how he's intentionally mispronouncing everything that he wants to. Like he doesn't even call Jake Hager Jake Hager. He calls him Jake Hagar because he's trying to call him Sammy Hagar in a sense. Everything does go fine. Like there's no table breaking. They don't brawl, but it doesn't finish perfectly because Sammy all of a sudden comes on screen, shows that Hager is attacking Dustin in the back. He ends up bashing Dustin's head into the limo and then slams the door on his arm. Now, in an Instagram post, Dustin showed that, it's a radial fracture. He's showing in a cast, keeping kayfabe alive, brother. But otherwise, it did its job. It got Jericho over as an asshole, got Cody over as the star babyface that you need to get behind, and everything worked out. And like I said, next week will be the go-home show before Full Gear, and you keep wondering, is that when we see Marty? Because his contract's up in November, but we don't know specifically when in November. Or maybe it's just going to be MJF turns. You got to think something's going to happen. You can't just think the match ends normally. Something's got to come, but you're just not sure what. Anyways, next up, we had the Elite, that being Kenny Omega and the Young Bucks going up against Kip Sabian and the Hybrid 2. Jesus Christ, Kenny's entrance was so good. The Undertale-looking intro showing the New Japan logo, how it was like talking back to him, calling him the cleaner, almost like the darkness is pulling at him. It even shows your best friend didn't even come with you, and it shows, I'm assuming it's Ibushi with the G1, was it? Yeah, the G1 trophy and stuff like that. Like even your friend left you, and soon all your others will do the same. You should just give up. And eventually, a sock gets thrown at the New Japan logo. Well, I guess the cartoon eyes version of it, and it just has the sand sounds in the background with obviously the lowercase font. And eventually, I think it's Megalovania is that song, isn't it? I believe it is. And all of a sudden, Kenny comes out and he's dressed as Sans. Even does the shrug as the pyro goes off. Was fantastic. The fans were loving that shit. The Bucks came back out as Ken and Ryu like they did at Fyter Fest, so they didn't do anything different. And then we get to the match. So Sabian and TH2 attack before the bell. They do mention during the match that Sabian did indeed dislocate his finger in his dark match a few weeks ago, but it seems like everything's so fine. I couldn't even take notes here. There was so much offense. It was a flurry of stuff. What it is. The Bucks, it's Kenny, it's Sabian, it's TH2. There's going to be a crazy bunch of shit. In the end, just to quickly go through it, there wasn't anything too crazy that I'm like, I got to note that one down. It was just a flurry of stuff. It's the same stuff you expect from these guys. Eventually, Elite do get the pinfall. Omega does hit the one-wing angel on Jack Evans. And post-match, Pride and Powerful do the Sting spot. Remember when Sting had a Sting mask on and he attacked, I'm trying to think who it was. I can't remember who it was now. But he attacked somebody, whether it was AJ or whether it was somebody else. And he just takes the mask off and it's Sting. Well, instead, Pride and Powerful had the Ricky Morty masks on that the fans were getting for the show, and they attacked the Bucks. Kenny eventually deals with that, and they run off. So that sets up again their match for Full Gear. We had a quick little thing here where Avalon came out, tried to cut a promo. Moxley comes through the crowd, just paradigms shifts Avalon and just does in a fantastic promo. Again, hitting the same points that he said to Tony, but again, referencing how WWE treated him, like, you know, saying you think you can unsanction me, like I'm unsanctionable. You know, and he just, I can't describe it. You have to go watch that promo. They did put it up on YouTube on AEW's channel. One of the best promos I've seen in a while. I don't know if it's nearly as good as Jericho's, because Jericho's did a lot of work, but in terms of like fire feel promos, like this was probably the best one. But man, like so far in less than 2 months, we've had 2 amazing promos from these guys. So fantastic. And then we end the night with the final of the tag team tournament. SCU, that being Scorpio Sky and Frankie Kazarian going up against the Lucha Brothers of Pentagon Jr. and Phoenix. And SCU actually won. I can't believe I was right. At the beginning, now I didn't know how the bracket was going to go. I thought that the Lucha Brothers would lose to the Jurassic Express and the Bucks would maybe beat Private Party. It was a 50-50 with me on that one. But I figured, well, Luchasaurus is so over, they're gonna win and probably take it to the final, but lose to SCU in the end. Because I was sure. I'm like, well, Dark Order's not going to win. I don't think Best Friends are going to win. I think SCU they've got the crowd. You know, the crowd definitely cheers a lot for them whenever Daniels is pointing the mic at them. So I think it works. But when Luchasaurus went down, and Lucha Brothers obviously would have had to win, because you're not going to have Marco Stunt and Jungle Boy beat the Lucha Brothers. It's just not going to happen. I got a little bit more curious about where it would go, but I still held to my ground that SCU would win. And I'm so happy that they did, because I think that was the right call. Now, the match itself didn't end the best way. We'll get to more. So Phoenix, again, doing that tightrope walking kick, actually hit it relatively well, but this is early in the match. This is how I knew they were going to lose, because every time Phoenix did that move, it led to the package pile driver with the stomp at the end. This time it didn't happen. Kazarian at one point pays homage to Christopher Daniels with the Angel's Wings to get the hot tag to Scorpio Sky later. Kazarian at one point also tried to do a Hurricanrana from the top rope while Phoenix was on the apron. I don't know if he missed or if maybe he slipped and Phoenix just didn't bump properly, but when Kaz went to... actually, they were saying that he might have got his foot caught in the ropes. I didn't catch that. But when Kaz hit the Hurricanrana, he didn't really get much of him, and he hit the side of the apron hard. I couldn't tell if it was his head or his shoulders or his back, but it wasn't pleasant. At one point, Pentagon put Kazarian through the timekeeper's table. Shivani noted that from now on it's 2-on-1. Again, that just reinforced my thought that Sky's somehow going to win. At one point, they go for the stomp package pile driver. Sky cradles Pentagon, and right at that point, Kaz comes out of nowhere to knock Phoenix away from the pinfall, and that's how it ends. It ends with a small package, and Shivani even says, after all of that, a small package is what does it. And again, like I said earlier with the Adam Page-Sammy Guevara match, it's nice that you can end a match with a not finisher. I will say, though, that in this case, I think a small package wasn't the right call. I think that he could have rolled up, or at least did a move to Pentagon, and Kaz could have knocked Phoenix off, and then they do some sort of move to get the pinfall, and that probably would have got a better attention. So the fans were kind of in shock that was how the match ended, not because SCU won, but because of how the match ended. But regardless, it was still a fantastic match to end what was a really good tournament, and that was the end of the show. So a very good show altogether. You had a great promo with Moxley. You had a pretty good women's match with Shanna and Hikaru Shida. Also, you had some extra good heel stuff with Guevara, with his trunks, and then also him and Jake Hager taking out Dustin Rhodes. Paige had a nice little promo at the end of his. And I mean, otherwise, you everything got over. And as a Halloween show, it was fun too, because you had the costumes with Kenny and the Bucks. You had the Best Friends coming out with the Rick and Morty promotion. Everything was very fun. And that was the important part, is by the end of the show, you had a blast watching it. And for, what is this, 5 weeks now, 4 or 5 weeks? You've got everything that you can ask for. Everything's hidden. I'm not leaving each show thinking, man, that could have been better. I mean, it always can be better, but I'm not thinking that when I finish the show. I'm thinking, that was fun. And to do that now a full month, and we're heading into Full Gear next weekend. Well, actually, I guess by the time that this show comes out, this will be I will be talking. I'm trying to decide whether I'm going to do a hot tag ahead of time with the TV shows, or if I'll go straight to Sunday morning like I'm doing today, recording the hot tag and just record it all, including Full Gear. It depends on how much fodder I think I have for the main show. Maybe I just do a separate review for Full Gear, like the way I have been doing for all the other pay-per-views. But also keep in mind that when I was doing full reviews of the pay-per-views, that's all we had. We didn't have any other shows in between. So, but otherwise, that's going to do it. We're going to have a go-home show before Full Gear, and we'll see what happens from there. Otherwise, that's going to do it. So with that being said, thank you so much for either watching or listening to the show, guys. So if you are watching on YouTube, please like the video and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, and comment below if you want to leave any messages, not to mention share the video. Same goes if you are on any audio platform. If you can rate this show, please do so, and not to mention share that. If you're looking for, I guess, anything else going on, I mean, I do run a few other podcasts. I do Jesus. I hate how sometimes words work that way, but I do have a podcast that I do for anime called The Church of Weeb that runs every 3 weeks right now because I do it quarterly in the simulcasted season. I also am planning on releasing a new Radical Rant podcast in a different format than normal. I'm still working on it. I might end up switching the topics. I was originally going to do it on Fallout 76 and their subscription service that came out, and as I keep not having time to record this properly, and I still need to add more to it to make it long enough to be worthy of a podcast, it may be to the point that it's just too late and maybe I do something else. But either way, I'm looking at doing a new podcast for gaming, but that is something that will be in the future. So again, if you are listening on YouTube and you want to get this in audio form, you can go to anchor.fm/radicalrants, and that will have all the available platforms there. Same goes if you're looking for more content. The YouTube channel, if you're listening via audio, has mostly they're just pictures with the audio, but I mean the VCR podcast that I run with my friends Vish and Chris that we do, that is mostly gaming related, we do have video for that. And if you are interested in listening to that podcast, it has its own Anchor setup. That is anchor.fm/VCR podcast. If you're looking to reach me on social media, you can mostly hit me up at Twitter at @csradical. I do have Instagram at cs-radical, although admittedly, Instagram is one of those places that I don't use nearly as often. And then if you want to just email me anything, whether it's comments, questions, any of that kind of stuff, you can email me at askcsradical@gmail.com. So with that being said, guys, thank you so much. We will see you next Sunday, whether it is a full show including Full Gear or a separate one plus a review maybe later. With that being said, guys, thank you so much, and I will see you next time.